All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Planning, Housing, and Economic Development Committee. It's Wednesday, April 20, and we are finishing up our work on the Silver Spring downtown and adjacent communities plan. And we've got a couple more items to get through today. The full council has begun its review, and we're looking forward to wrapping this up. So over to you, Pam.
Great. Thank you. You are correct. This is our last work session. We will hopefully get through the entire packet today. There are a few small items of implementation that we won't get to as a committee, but they'll come to the full council, but they are substantive enough to worry about them not being reviewed by full committee. So with that, what we're starting with today,
substantive, sorry, what you just said was they're substantive enough to worry about them not being.
No, not substantive enough.
Not substantive enough. Thank you.
They are perfunctory enough that it will be fine to offer to council. And what we're starting with today at request of Councilmember Friedson is the correspondence we've received over the course of this review that really looks at certain properties or and typically related to zoning, density, or height. And then we'll move into the housing evaluation that was done on the garden apartments. And then finally with some implementation concerns and evaluation. So with that, we'll start with Fenton Village. And in Fenton Village, we received a letter from the county executive on March 25th regarding specifications related to garage 4. And we've talked about garage 4 a couple times now. We talked about it in council yesterday. This is the one with the green loop connection, the north-south right-of-way connection, and some green public space. After we had reviewed it with the committee, the CE wrote in requesting a zoning change on the property to make it more available for redevelopment. If there's greater density on the property and height, although they didn't ask for more height, but greater density on the property, it makes redevelopment easier. And so council staff's suggestion is that the committee support that recommendation to move from a 3 FAR CR zoning to a 5 FAR. You've also received, just I'll quickly note it, an addendum for garage 2, kind of a related topic, but we are covering the downtown North District later in this packet. So if you don't mind, I'll wait on that one for right now. And we'll just address garage 4. And I know that MCDOT is with us today if you have a question. Okay.
All right. Well, glad they are following along and made that request, and I certainly will support that. Any comments here from colleagues first?
Without objection.
All right,
yeah,
great.
I'm fine with that. I did just want to ask, on these garage sites, and I know we've talked about this before, and I think there's unanimous agreement that, we want to make sure we're continuing to send the message that on this publicly owned land that we're maximizing affordability on those sites. And is that, I guess it's kind of a Pam question, or
great question. Let's find out what this plan says about that.
I actually, I'll weigh in quickly, but then I'd love to turn it to planning staff. I don't think that we have the recommendation that's been as explicit as it has been in prior plans that says on this public property, redevelopment should strive for, I think it has been in the past
30%
minimum as a floor. Yeah.
30% affordable, right?
Well, we could add that.
I see Tara and Lisa both have hands up.
Tara and Lisa, yeah. And while you're speaking to these points, if you could address, I am a little worried that a lot of this public land will be devoted to creating a street and park space, which, those are competing public benefits, but are we leaving enough for developable land for housing? Will there be enough in this location and in general? Tara and Lisa. Tara, we just lost you there. Oh, there you are.
Just to thank you, Councilmember Reamer. Just to speak to the last point, we actually do have a recommendation in the housing recommendations overall that all public sites in the plan should strive for 30% MPDUs or other affordable housing components. So that covers redevelopment of any parking garages, parking lots, or any other county-owned land in the plan. So we didn't feel the need to make it on a site-specific basis because we made it at the plan-wide level. So I'll just
is that 30%? I know I had tried with 15% being at 50% below AMI, or do you not?
Yes.
Is that same? Okay, good.
Yes, on page 88 of the plan, It reads, publicly owned property should be encouraged to provide up to 30% MPDUs with 15% affordable to households earning at the standard MPDU level or of 65 to 70% or less area median income, and 15% affordable to households earning less than 50% of AMI.
Okay. All right. Well, I think that covers it. Thank you.
It's a good question. I mean, that's an important point about the plan. We're seeking that there is a reasonable amount of public property remaining. We've already developed actually a fair amount of public property in the downtown area, and we've done a great job with ensuring affordability in there, and HOC has been developing there. But, you know, we want to continue to see public land going for housing, and we want to achieve at least 30%. You know, we could do certainly more than that if it's a good sized property like we've done, you know, the one that's adjacent to the library, for example. And that's a key part of growing the supply of affordable housing in Silver Spring, which I think it has grown. I mean, that's sort of what's amazing about it is the, you know, as Casey presented at the beginning of our plan discussion, that the amount of affordable housing in Silver Spring has grown over time. And, you know, there has been a lot of new development bringing in residents who are paying market rate, but there's also a lot more residents who are paying, you know, essentially either subsidized rents or low market rate. Okay.
The only thing, yeah, Casey, you go right ahead. I was going to make the same point.
Yeah, we're not here to get in the way, but we just want to point out that you're talking 5 FAR, which is not consistent with the adjoining properties. So that means no SIF. I know, you know, the thought process of like making this as easy and cheap as possible if it's a public project that probably involves affordable housing, but just keep in mind, you know, a lot of forever is a long time, and master plan is not quite as long, but it is, you know, a generation or more. And you might find that something happens with this property that's different than what you're thinking today. So just might want to.
You're saying by giving it 5 FAR, if they needed more than 3, they wouldn't be required to purchase it from the density fund. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, but I think in this case, this is a public property that is likely being used for a public purpose, and so we wouldn't want to charge it. I mean, it is a public property, and therefore it will be used for a public use, so we would sort of be charging ourselves. But okay, I hear what you're saying.
Yeah, and it could involve some kind of market rate development too, right? That's
right, but if it's well, anyway, I hear what you're saying, but I don't think that that should apply to public land. And anyway, okay. Any other comment here? I mean, if we charge it, then we're just going to have to end up paying for that through a reduced property price in any deal that we do. You know.
Yeah, I don't think we're objecting in this particular case. We're just trying to point out, you know, sort of consistency issues. We are trying to zone properties, and you'll see other cases that are going to come up later this afternoon about, you know, do you zone something consistent with what is nearby or not?
Gotcha.
And so we're just sort of bringing up the consistency issue.
Planting a consistency flag. Understood. Hannah.
Thank you. I just wanted to address the comment that Councilmember Reamer made about the width of the road, and just reiterate the fact that DOT has concerns on the limitation of the potential for affordable housing on this site as was proposed. And there is language that was transmitted in a memo on March 25th, I believe, where we propose alternate language that would give us more flexibility to maximize the potential for affordable housing, potentially shrink the footprint of that proposed road to accommodate pedestrians that take up less of the space.
Was that by, Hannah, were you just suggesting to shrink the width of the road basically, or what was DOT's suggestion there?
DOT's suggestion is to consider this north-south connection as a pedestrian-focused connection rather than a loading area for accommodating vehicles. And one major concern we have that relates to this discussion about maximizing potential of public land is the fact that it would require demolition of Garage 4. And we have heard from affordable housing developers who have approached us with an interest in maintaining that garage and building around and above it. So our comments, if you look, really aim to not go against the recommendations, but to maintain flexibility if a more optimal solution can be reached with a developer.
Okay, well, I'm actually in agreement with you here. I would like more flexibility. I'm not 100% sold here on the overriding importance of this interior road. I mean, we've got an example of it in place already a block over, and I think it's of marginal value, to be quite honest. I just don't think these blocks are that long. I don't think we have a super block problem in downtown Silver Spring. I have to say, I don't totally get this. Let's talk about it a little bit more. I mean, you're saying a pedestrian focused street, not a 2-lane, plus bikes and PHEDs width.
I think
let's
this
hear
is
what planning has to say.
Yeah, I think this is a site plan issue,
Yeah.
and we're glad to talk about it when we get to site plan. It's very difficult to do site plan decisions in a master plan.
Yeah.
But I think that one of the things that has been in the master plan, even before this master plan, and that we are simply carrying through, is the idea that there needs to be a way to break up the super blocks. And I hear Councilmember Reamer, who does not believe that it is a super block, but I think if you experience walking by the existing development that now has a road, you will see that it actually has done an effective job of making that street, this is across from Caldy's, more pedestrian friendly by making it a shorter block, by giving an opportunity to walk into a green space, and to also offer some opportunities for loading. I mean, it's a combination of factors. We always have a problem with folks who want to load and unload off our busiest streets. And by having a secondary street that breaks up the super block, we are able to provide additional opportunities for loading and parking entrances to buildings. We don't know what the ultimate design is going to be for any of the affordable housing developments that might happen on this block. I would just say we have a track record of being able to work things out when we get to the site plan stage. And I have no doubt that the competing interests here will be able to be worked out when we get to the site plan stage. We've done it in the block to the north already, and we'll do it in this block as well.
Okay. Yeah, generally, I would agree with you that that's why I'm suggesting flexible language here. I want to make sure that we will have flexible language. I am somewhat unimpressed by the the new road that goes through the block by the post office there. It seems pretty, meh to me, but I'm just a person who, I'm just a user in that context. Chris and Hannah, and then we should try to move on, but let's make sure we have some language that allows for flexibility so this can be addressed in site plan.
It seems like we have general agreement on that. I did want to agree with Director Wright that if the site is redeveloped in such a way that it is broken into pieces and essentially Garage 4 is no longer there, then it would be advantageous to have some internal circulation as proposed. Our only concern is that there's some likelihood that it would be developed retaining all or a portion of Garage 4 structure, in which case this wouldn't really be a viable alternative. And if that recommendation is too strong, it might limit the ability to take advantage of that structure, which would be, tens of millions of dollars to recreate.
More valuable than the land, probably.
Possibly so, as some of these other parking garages, the construction of the garage is more expensive than the land. So to your point, Councilmember Reamer, Chair Reamer, we'd like to see the flexibility to allow a development to proceed here that didn't necessitate that connection. But if that garage isn't on the site, then certainly that type of connection would be beneficial.
Okay. So, and I do hear what Director Wright is saying about loading. I think that is an important issue, so again, leaning towards site plan issues. Hannah, something?
Yeah, I just wanted to, in terms of providing language, we did provide a markup on March 25th. There's a March 25th letter where DOT provided suggested language that we think would meet the objectives that everyone here seems to share while also preserving flexibility. One of the suggested pieces of language, which I think aligns with what Director Wright was saying, is that we suggested language that says a pedestrian connection with vehicular access as needed for site access, not knowing exactly what will be needed and how the site plan will eventually be proposed.
Okay.
Well, if the garage stays, there won't be a pedestrian connection either, except walking through the garage. So I think that maybe the issue is really, if the garage is retained, then there would not need to be a mid-block connection because the building would be taking up that mid-block connection. If the garage is not retained and the whole block is redeveloped, then there would be the mid-block connection that's anticipated. Something, some language to that effect, because clearly if the garage is going to stay there, I don't think we expect to have people either driving through or walking through that garage. It takes up the middle of the block.
Okay, that works. Pam?
Yeah, the only question I had is that this is in the plan also listed as a new street. In the transportation plan wide recommendations, it's listed as a business district street with a 70-foot right-of-way, and I don't know if that needs to change based on this conversation. It's just not my area, but I did note that it's not just language in the district, there's language or a specification for it in the plan-wide recommendations for transportation.
That's for that interior street that would be added?
Yes, it's a brand new street.
Pam, I agree with you. 70 feet would be very large.
Yeah, I just don't share that. I am not compelled by this idea that Silver Spring has a super block brow. I'm not in the downtown. And a 70 feet would be very wide. I mean, I think we would want something more targeted than that. So could we ask the planning to give some?
Well, we can work on language. I think that the 70-foot right of way may be, a bit much. We're really talking about if the whole block is redeveloped and the garage is torn down, really we're talking about a 2-lane road. And we can talk about what the minimum right of way for that might be.
I mean, right. Because this road would go from Sligo Avenue to Silver Spring Avenue. I mean, and then it would connect
with a road that is already on Silver Spring Avenue. I mean, there is a set of roads that it is intended for this to go north, south.
It's a piece of a whole.
Yes, as part of every block.
Okay, so we're going to get some new language on the road and the width, and we're going to have some language addressing flexibility for this particular location, especially noting site plan is, that there's a lot of flexibility for the site plan process, and certainly we're not insisting that the garage be torn down, and if there's an option to have housing that is on the front and side of the garage, we'd be very enthusiastic about that as well. Okay. Colleagues, any clarifying question here? No? Okay. Great.
We'll move on. The next one is in the Metro Center District. I'll turn it over to Ms. Nadeau.
So for Metro Center, there's 2 specific properties we're going to talk about. First is the Metro Plaza. So the developer requested additional height here to account for the substation, and the two requests in the letter were to either measure starting 85 feet off the ground or just add 85 feet. So this is actually a property that is in the biz. And so given the committee's recommendation to just give those properties the additional height, the mapped height is now going to be 300 feet. I believe with the 85 feet, the owner had requested 325. The council staff feels 300 feet should be sufficient for additional development here. So that's the council staff recommendation for changing the height for that property.
Okay. Without objection. All right. Sounds good. Thank
The
you.
next property is the one at the corner of 8600 Georgia Avenue. So this also encompasses, it's a corner property. So it also is, there's three different addresses here. There's 8501 Colesville and then 8615 Ramsey. So the committee discussed this property previously and agreed to increase the mapped height from 200 to 240 feet, but chose to wait to make any adjustments to density until you reviewed the Connectivity Infrastructure Fund. So now we're circling back to that since that review has been done. The current FAR for this property is 5, and they're requesting 8 FAR. So there's two things to consider here. It is true that the abutting and confronting properties do have the 240 feet height with the 8 FAR. So the committee can either go ahead and give this property that same additional density, or the alternative is they would then, if you don't give that to this property, then they will have to contribute to the infrastructure fund in order to get that additional density. So this is that question of, do you give them the mapped density that they're requesting or have them contribute instead?
Okay. Well, I'm inclined to provide them the density that they need to develop, which I think is, generally in the public interest here. But let's hear what my colleagues say. Andrew?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, unless there's a credible reason why this property has less density than the abutting properties, I don't think there's a justifiable reason for us not to make it consistent with the abutting properties. So I think, 8 FAR is reasonable. We've already changed the height, and I think it would be more fair, more consistent, and more likely to get the outcome that we want, which is redevelopment. I understand the points that the chair made earlier, Chair Anderson made earlier, of wanting to incentivize as many people paying into the fund as possible, but it's hard to justify just because it was like this in a prior plan that one site has less density than another site for no compelling public reason. So I'd say 8 FAR makes sense.
Okay. Councilmember Jawanda.
Yeah, I think they should pay into the SIF for this. This is the corner of Georgia and Colesville. It's right across from Discovery, my old place of employment, abutting Twin Towers. There will be a lot of opportunity here to develop, and a lot of, I think, interest. It's that old gas station, I think, is this where this is? It's just sitting there. And so I think we should. The only leverage we have is zoning and density, and once we give it up, that's what it is. And so I think we've created the framework of the SIF. This is not previously zoned. That I think Discovery Building's a little bit of a different case there. So I would like to. I'm in the minority here, but I think they should pay the SIF just like everyone else to get the additional density.
Okay, thank you. My view here is we stand to make, a lot more revenue to the county if this building goes to the full height and full density. And I think really that's what we ought to prioritize, is the long-term payout from development that takes maximum advantage of the envelope that we feel is appropriate. So
why not get both, Mr. Chair?
Well, I think we live in a world that is not so easy to get everything. And this property has sat undeveloped for some time. And the upfront costs of development have certainly been a factor in the continuing lack of development there at this location. So, I would love to see a very tall, dense building replace this gas station. And I think if you take the long view, 25, 50 years, we will generate a huge increase of revenue to the county. And I think it's better to be, it's not to be penny wise and pound foolish by raising barriers to making that happen in the first place. So that's why I just generally tend to reduce upfront costs as much as we can in order to get long-term economic gains for the county and for the community. Andrew, you had your hand up, but
yeah, I was going to say, and then I decided I'd give up since we already have 2-1, and it seems like we're ready to move on.
Yeah, don't beat me down, please.
Yeah, issue. No, I'm not. I was really just point of clarification here. I had wanted the SIF number to be lower, but I wasn't going to get into that. The more important issue is this site has some infrastructure challenges, WSSC and others that have been well documented and the council has been made aware of. We did make a policy change, which I supported and feel strongly about, that the SIF not go to infrastructure costs, that it focus on the other elements that planning had recommended. And so that's a factor here as well. Part of the thought process is paying into the infrastructure that is needed and provide some flexibility for public support for that. That is no longer one of the uses of this fund. So I just wanted to note that because I think that it's related to this issue. But anyways, it looks like we have a 2-1 vote and we're ready to move on to the next issue. So I don't want to dwell on it.
okay. I didn't see such a clear line as there's no infrastructure in the fund, but we removed certain infrastructure from it. But I thought there was still some infrastructure in it. Is that just to put a very fine point on that, Pam?
We removed utilities was the issue that I think Councilmember Friedsen's alluding to. Utilities were a type of element of the fund that was proposed in the planning board draft, but as those can be more specific to a certain block or area and are not necessarily plan wide, the things in this fund really do need to have an impact on the entire plan area for the council to collect a fee for it.
Okay. We should go over clearly for the full council, if not, in that packet, what is in that, what are the eligible expenditures? My understanding was that we scaled it back to focus it on things we thought were important, and we didn't want to replicate what MCDOT would charge for in its processes. So some of the transportation stuff would not be targeted, but it was more community infrastructure, which I think was the original title of the fund, the Community Infrastructure Fund. And that said, there was still some stuff in there that wasn't so transportation focused, like green streets. It was more about quality of life. So, okay, I think we're all on the same page. Let's keep going.
So next is Ripley District. So testimony was received for 8230 Ripley Street. This is the Sherwin-Williams building. Quick correction to the staff report in the letter. It should be 8230 Georgia. It's on that corner. And it's map number 38B. But the way the Sherwin-Williams building. Yeah. So the way the opportunity sites language reads in the plan is it puts together the block of Ripley Street, Dixon Avenue, and Georgia Avenue, and says a large potential development site along Georgia, recommends redevelopment of the site to include a central open space connected across Ripley to the Georgia Avenue site. So the property owner of the Sherwin-Williams building wrote in saying that redeveloping together is very unlikely. I believe 8226 Georgia Avenue was recently redeveloped, and then also they have different owners and then separated by a right-of-way. So the first issue is the way it's phrased here. Council staff doesn't think it explicitly says they have to redevelop together, but if the committee wishes, then we can tweak that language. We can work with planning to tweak the language to make it clear that it is 3 separate sites. One recommendation would be where it says plan recommends redevelopment of this site. It could say of these sites, something like that, if the committee thinks that it is unclear that these aren't expected to all develop under one owner. So that's the first issue. And the second is the
yes,
property.
I think we don't expect it all, right? I mean, how can we, right? Yeah, okay. Andrew,
so
on this,
So
I'm
are you?
sorry.
Yeah,
I'm sorry to interrupt you, Lou. Andrew, did you have a comment on this?
well, yeah, yes, I think either language, I would be comfortable if we had language just explicitly say that, because there is some concern there. And I don't believe, unless I'm mistaken, that it's the intention of planning to expect 3 sites with 3 different owners separated by a right of way to redevelop together. I think we could just eliminate some of that confusion and all be on the same page, which it doesn't feel like we aren't. If not, I think we just explicitly, at the very least, have planning state that they would find conformance with the master plan if the property owner of one of those 3 sites comes forward with an application to develop one of the parcels on its own. I think that's important to clarify that. And I think if we could have language, to confirm that, that would be even better. So I just wanted to throw that out there.
And from planning's perspective, that's fine. I think, and I just want to take sort of a quick educational moment about master plans. Master plans cannot compel property owners to assemble property. That is not within the power of a master plan to do. If an individual property owner comes in and wishes to develop, even though they have not assembled, it would be hard to say, no, you're not allowed. And we take that as a given, we take that for granted. And that is true not just on this site, but on literally dozens of sites all around downtown Silver Spring. So I don't know, again, if we have to state that explicitly on this site, or if we just have, an overarching statement, which is we cannot compel property owners to assemble. We can suggest that it would make a nice development site if people assembled, but it isn't something we can force people to do.
Yeah, but I'll just say, I guess from my perspective, the fact that it's separated by a right of way and the fact that the development, the redevelopment efforts seem to be on different timing, I'm not sure I agree if it, of the strong suggestion even. I think the concern that we're hearing is that even having a strong suggestion that, falls short legally of compelling would impact the applicant from coming forward. And to me, I'm not comfortable with that language personally. I'd rather say, it would just be very rare for us, at least, and you certainly would know the history better than I would of other master plans, but to suggest joint developments that go, that are basically divided by public rights of way. It just seems like an odd dynamic for me. So at least my sense would be, I understand that you can't compel legally, but I think the concern is that the language here is suggesting, and there are a lot of things in master plans that are suggestions that don't necessarily compel, but they do impact redevelopment, and they do impact the planning board's review and analysis of an application. And I wouldn't want to prejudice it in that way. I don't think that, it is, at least what I think here is, is beneficial to get the outcome that we're looking for, or even likely, given the dynamics of the timing of the different parcels. So at least from my perspective, I don't want to suggest to that extent that strongly, and want to make sure that we're explicit, that we aren't suggesting that there is a lack of conformance with the master plan in some way if the property owner moves forward with an application by themselves, even if you can't compel them legally to do so.
To just be specific about the language on page 51 of the master plan, when it talks about 8230 Georgia Avenue, Sherwin-Williams site, It notes this site is significantly constrained by the master planned right-of-way for Ripley Street between Dixon Avenue and Georgia Avenue, the dedication of which would significantly reduce the developable area. Previous efforts to incorporate this site into adjacent developments were unsuccessful. It says staff recommends coordinating redevelopment of this site with the property across Ripley Street. If we want to literally just remove that last sentence, that's fine.
I would support that. Thank you for your help on that.
I think that's fine. I mean, I think staff's making a good point, right? But at the end of the day, you know, language in this plan one way or the other isn't going to cause that to happen. Okay.
I agree with the staff recommendation, but it sounds like you guys don't. Right.
Well, so staff, are you referring to the planning staff or to the council staff? Will?
I was referring to the council staff.
And does council staff's recommendation was consistent with the planning staff or no? I don't know if there was.
Well, I think there is a new twist. The council staff was suggesting adding language that would say streetscape and other public use facilities should not significantly reduce the developable area. And separate from that, in that paragraph that I just read, we were talking about removing a sentence that says staff recommends coordinating redevelopment of this site with the property across Ripley Street. So you would be subtracting a sentence.
Okay. So
on
just to be
page
clear,
50.
like as Gwen said, this language cannot possibly compel the owners across the street from developing cannot require them to develop their property. So we could say we believe it would be better, if this property was developed in a unified way. I got no problem saying that.
Right. Same here.
Wouldn't all properties be better if they were developed in a unified way? I mean, I understand the rationale with staff put into this at the planning department. I just think you could almost always include certain language like that. You almost always can take for granted that the planning board does not have the ability to compel two private property owners to, work together and do an application together. And so if there
can shed some light here, I'm a little
I don't see any reason why we would keep it in if there's no compelling reason to keep it in. That's my point.
Right. I want to clarify too, there's also two different parts in this on page 51. So there's the one opportunity site that puts the 3 blocks together. And then there's a bullet about the Sherwin-Williams site. So that's the language that Ms. Wright was reading about it. Council staff actually agrees with striking that last sentence. I think that is a good idea. As for the language about streetscapes, that would go in the section where it does loop Ripley Street, Dixon Avenue, Georgia Avenue for that opportunity site. Just adding in language, because the other thing the developer mentioned is because there's a master planned right of way there isn't a lot of space to develop. And so making it clearer that streetscapes and other public use facilities should try not to reduce that developable area any further. So that's 2 different recommendations. So the first is putting that streetscape and public use facilities language with the block of Ripley Street, Dixon Avenue, Georgia Avenue, and clarifying that it's 3 separate properties that don't have to develop together, of course. And then for the Sherwin-Williams site, opportunity site, striking that last sentence. So those are the 3, those are the 3 little red lines that would appear in the draft.
Andrew?
I support both of those recommendations, and now I support council staff.
Okay.
Here with Ms. Wright helping us get here. So thank you for the consensus.
All right. Great. Thank you, council staff. All right, let's continue.
So the next site is also in Ripley. And actually it is for the Sherwin-Williams site as well. We received a letter from the Montgomery Preservation noting that this is the former headquarters of the Little Tavern Companies. And the letter noted the building's racist history and suggested adding signage, and then also noted that the building has an Art Deco style that should be preserved and providing green space in front of the building. So council staff just wanted to reiterate again, as we've said in previous work sessions, that something being an opportunity site is not synonymous with demolition. I think that was something implied in the letter. So we said that before, so I wanted to stress that again. Also, if you look at the diagram on page 52 of the plan, there are already 3 proposed open spaces in this district. So council staff doesn't think it's necessary to add the language about providing green space in front of the building. And then lastly, in terms of addressing its potential historic nature, in the historic resources section, there's a section that sort of lists here other historic sites that could be looked at. So I think the best recommendation here would be to maybe add this property there, but not change the opportunity site language.
Okay. I think this is a cool building. I think it's a funky building. I think it makes Silver Spring a better place. I do not think it has significant historical value. I'd like to hear what Rebecca has to say, and then we'll go to Councilmember Friedson. Can I just ask, when I call on you, don't remove your hand just yet, because then you move across the screen. And so we're all looking at you in one place, and then you move just when you start to talk. So
Sorry. Thank you. What I'd like to note, this building has been studied. This building was studied many decades ago. It was studied about 20 years ago during the last Silver Spring CBD plan for its potential historic significance, and it was not designated at that time. The history of this specific building and the history of Little Taverns as a business are also captured in a historical marker that the Silver Spring Historical Society put up in the downtown that has a picture of this building and a discussion of it as the headquarters and Little Taverns as a business. And it has multiple paragraphs also discussing the racially discriminatory policies of the business. So from the historic preservation perspective, this is an old, like, not an argument, but this has been gone over many, many times for many decades. And while I appreciate the continued interest from the community, as you note, it's a cool looking building. It's not a historic building. And we do not recommend any additional plan language recognizing it as such.
it's a zombie designation idea. All right, yeah. Andrew.
Yeah, I was actually just going to say, I was going to ask, I put my hand up, and then when Ms. Ballas started speaking, I was going to ask, my understanding was this had already been studied and determined. And so you've gone through that. For that reason, I go to the historic preservation experts on this, and we've already reviewed it and have decided not to include it. Then I don't think we should include it here. I appreciate council staff recommending this to try to thread the needle a little bit, but I just don't think it's necessary. I'd rather stick with what we'd already done before. And I was thinking in my head, as you were saying, the zombie and the other, I was thinking to myself, for Councilmember Jawando, our resident council member lawyer here, it seems like asked and answered. So, this was put up, it was reviewed, the process took place. I'm glad that there is the wayfinding information and other opportunities to share the history, but there's a process for this. The process has taken place, and I don't think we should include it in the plan, because then the integrity of the process, I think, has some challenges if we ignore the results of it and include it in future plans. I'd rather stick with planning on that. Thanks.
Sure. And I'll just add to that, just because something is cool and is interesting does not mean that it rises to the level of historic designation. And there are gradients of historical value. And I agree. I think this building is cool. I'm glad it's there. When I drive by it, I like to look at it. I think it creates some visual interest in Silver Spring. The next building there could also create some visual interest in Silver Spring, to be clear. And there's some great architecture around that area now that I also love to look at that is brand new. So, just because it's cool today doesn't mean something couldn't be cool there in the future also. But the bigger point being, not every cool building has true historic preservation merit, and that's just the reality. Like, it's a more targeted application because it has a significant impact on property rights and, it's something we use judiciously. So, just because we like something doesn't mean we have to designate it.
But just that being said, Mr. Chairman, I would like to move that any future building be red that is at that location, that, in perpetuity. I'm
So make sure that is read into the plan. All right.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah.
Wait a second. Now we're talking about painting the Silver Spring red. That's getting a little bit into the zombie horror zone.
Yeah, exactly. Just
okay.
And for people watching, the building is painted red now. That's why I said that. But and one of the things, but I don't mean that. So thank you.
He quickly backpedals from his bold proclamation.
We need Sarcalics, a new font in the minutes here.
Silver Spring red. We're going to have a new color. All right, great. So back to council staff. Yeah, we're moving a little. We got to keep moving.
I'll do these actually quickly. So the next two are South Silver Spring. So there's 7980 Georgia Avenue. So this is near Jessup Blair Park. It's behind the 7-Eleven that's across from the hotel over there. The committee already talked about this property when talking about removing the reference to the community garden. So the council staff recommendation here is to also strike most of the sentence about improving and creating a through block connection. Council staff's recommendation is to say improve connections by creating a through block connection at the site and then stopping there, because the letter we received was the specific place where this through block connection is recommended is just difficult for the developer to work around. So leaving it more open-ended so that it's flexible. Okay. And this is page 7 of the staff report.
All right. Okay.
Sorry, go ahead.
Sounds good. Yeah. Okay.
And then the last one for South Silver Spring is 8001 Newell Street. This is the self-storage facility. We've discussed this one at previous work sessions as well. And the committee had said to circle back to it. So council staff's recommendation is not adding any language to the plan or the ZTA about expansion of self-storage. So this is a grandfathered use here since it's in the CR zone, so they can't expand currently. And the recommendation is if the council has a desire to have more self-storage in CR zones, then that can be examined countywide in a ZTA separate from this Silver Spring plan process.
Okay. All right, thank you. Good recommendation. We'll continue.
Okay, we are now moving into downtown North. What I'll ask is we have Mr. Conklin here and Mr. Bossi. I did an addendum for this meeting today. It was about Garage 2. It came in after we posted the staff report, or about at the same time. And similar to the request for Garage 4, it's really about a zoning request for Garage 2, which is located in the downtown North District. And then we'll cover the other property here quickly. But if they want to weigh in, they're just similar to the other one. It's a certain zoning that was provided on Garage 4. This is a little different in that the property owned by MCDOT is actually split zone. There is a portion of the property that is a surface lot and their parking lot district maintenance building. And that is zoned in the same fashion as the old planning headquarter property that it abuts. And then the garage has existing and proposed a higher zoning. So what the letter from MCDOT asks is to not have a split zone property and to combine the zoning for what they own, the garage plus the building plus a small amount of surface parking there under one zone, which is typically what we do in a master plan process. That's not unusual to have that request, to combine them under one zoning, and that being the zoning that the plan has recommended for Garage 2. So in this case, they really aren't asking for more, but they're asking for consistent zoning. In addition, they did ask for some more height, but I think that was prior to the committee's discussion of two things. One, the committee has recommended expanding the height incentive zoned area, which will now be mapped, and that would affect these properties. That new expansion is literally along that property line. So not only would it get consistent zoning, it would be consistent with the new boundary for the mapped higher heights. And that mapped higher height for this property would around 262 feet. So anyway, I'll let Mr. Conklin weigh in, but I just want to give you the general picture of it. Council staff supports the recommended change for higher density and the height of 262.
Ms. Dunn was more eloquent in describing this than I would be, so I have nothing to add to her statements.
All right. Good. Well, sounds like this is working out nicely, and we're looking forward to seeing this idea progress with United Therapeutics in the county, and we hope that comes together quickly.
Great. So that takes care of the addendum. What's in the packet? Sorry.
Gwen, did you have something on that or next? Nope, you're on mute now. You're on mute, Gwen.
Sorry, I just was wondering if we missed, we seem to have skipped to page 9 of the packet, and there was another property on page 8.
Yeah, 8700 First Avenue at Fenway.
Yeah, we'll cover that one next. This one had, I'm sorry for the confusion. This one was an addendum to a packet that came in late yesterday. We got it out late about Garage 2. So we're kind of skipping around just a little bit, but yeah, we'll cover next the property on page 8.
Okay.
Is that okay? Is everyone prepared for that one next without questions?
So we just
Okay.
did
A
page
little out of order.
9. Now we're going back to page 8. Okay.
Yes. Sorry about that.
Okay.
My confusion. On page 8, you will see there's a request. This is also in downtown North. It is at 8700 First Avenue. It is literally at the corner of First Avenue and Fenwick. And the property owner here, or the representative for the property owner, has written in requesting an increase in both zoning and height. We'll cover height first. You know, the height for this property, the plan has recommended is a height of 110. Again, this is based off the current heights. They gave 20% increases in height across the board to most properties. But what this property owner representative noticed is that there is an abutting property that is literally across the street from the single family neighborhood that existing today and proposed has a higher height. It abuts this part of the zoning block, has a height of in the plan proposed for 175, where this one is proposed for 110. The other confronting properties on at least 2 of 3 sides have heights either at 175 or because they're in the height incentive zoned area will actually have a height in excess of 200 feet. On one side to the west of this property is a height of 110. So given the abutting properties height of 175 and 2 of 3 confronting properties with heights at 175 or higher, council staff would recommend providing the higher height for this property at 175. The second piece of this request was to get density of 5 versus density of 3. The density on the property, in this case, it again is up to committee whether they think that this is an anomalously low density for the site. I do think that was a important reason for why the Colesville and Georgia Avenue site was recommended by at least 2 of the committee members as being increased because it seemed anomalously low given its abutting properties were at 8s. And this one's more of a toss-up.
Okay. Andrew Friedson first, and then Mildred Wando.
Yeah, I'm comfortable giving the 5 FAR for the same reasons, out of consistency with the surrounding properties. I understand this one isn't quite as clear as the other, but again, I'm not sure that there's a totally compelling reason why the density of this property would be different. I don't think the last master plan should dictate, all future master plans, and so I would support 5 FAR.
Bill.
Yeah, I actually lived on the street. This is the street where Georgian Towers and the Point, and I think it's called something different now. But it's a very high traffic street. It's across from the Charter House, one of our poorly maintained, unfortunately, consistently senior facilities. This little house on the corner, I always wondered why it was there. It absolutely should be able to. And then it has the little apartment that I think is 110 to the I don't know, east, west, I don't know, whatever it's closest to is the one that's a kind of a moderately sized multifamily, which makes sense to allow. I think this street gets a lot of traffic, and it does have the parking garage across the street, which we just talked about. But, I think obviously giving the height is good. The density, I would be in the same place as the last one. If they want the extra density, there should be some contribution to the fund. So I guess I kind of am in the middle there. I think that it obviously agree with the map type and makes sense to have a taller building there, but on the density front, I think this is a different, this is a smaller, smaller street. It's kind of one over from Georgia, and would like to see that infrastructure fund included.
Lovely. Okay, so Councilmember Friedson's argument here was that 5 would be more consistent with the surrounding area. Is that?
Well, it's a little bit of a mix, I think.
Yeah, I mean, it's more consistent generally, but it's not as clear cut according, as council staff has noted as the other, which is a little bit, more.
It could go either way, I guess. Essentially. Well, I do think this is an eyesore. This little house right there has always stuck out as an example of, strange reality of development in Silver Springs. So I'm more aligned with the idea of, give them the density and the height and hope they can get something happening, because whatever, what they've got now isn't getting anywhere. What they've got now is resulting in something that's pretty undesirable in my view. So I would hope we can incentivize some action here. So I'm in agreement with Councilmember Friedson.
And could we just hear what I missed?
Yeah.
What was the point you were going to make?
Oh, I was just going to try to clarify that it is a mix of zoning around this property. Some is a 3 and some is a 5 FAR.
Right. And one of my points, if it could just be included in the packet, that this is distinguishable in that, I think an infrastructure investment is appropriate. You put more people on that street. There's already a lot of people on that street. And I think, again, we only have a chance to, we're already giving a ton here. It's going to be redeveloped more, and which is good, because it shouldn't be, that type of house shouldn't be there. The question isn't nothing, or it's just, can we get some sort of additional investment considering this location and the surrounding zoning? So if there could just be as you do well, Pam and Lavu, distinguish between the surrounding area here.
Absolutely.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay. Moving along, if you guys are ready for that. The next, again, we sort of covered this. I just wanted to throw the map in front of the committee for the discussion we had last work session about expanding the boundary for the mapped higher heights. We had a conversation about it, but it didn't include a map in your packet. This is just that map. And again, it illustrates the issue that MCDOT was having with its property. Actually, where the dotted line is on that packet is pretty much the property that MCDOT owns in conjunction with that garage. We move on to adjacent communities. I don't really think there was a thing for the committee to weigh in there. I just wanted you to see it if there's any other concerns. The adjacent community had a one request, and that was a property that abuts another property that is actually in the downtown North District, but it is a R60 property on Colesville Road, right next to a very tall multifamily building that is across Spring Street from United Therapeutics, if that kind of gives you an idea of where it is. And the property wrote in asking for some R20 zoning. They cited the fact that they do abut a multi-story, very tall apartment building, and it could be appropriate for them as well to have some additional density on their R60 lot. And in reviewing sort of what they could achieve with R20 on the lot, they could get maybe 3 units at the most. The real consideration isn't sort of the density on the property, but really the process and the conversation with the community. This property owner is very late to the process, didn't go to the board, wasn't engaged during the planning board process, did not talk to the public hearing at the council, and does abut other R60 single family homes on 2 sides. So while it does have the apartment building on one side, it does have single family homes on the other. My recommendation is more appropriate would be a recommendation for a floating zone for this property. And that's not without precedent. We did that recently in the Montgomery Hills Forest Glen plan when there was interest in possibly more density in areas close to the Forest Glen Metro. Those properties were then given a master plan recommendation for a floating zone. And I would work with, planning staff to get what that right recommendation for density and height would be on the property, but.
Okay. Will.
Yeah, this is the kind of just the one where you're entering in downtown. So it's kind of like entering the business district. It's right on the edge there across from Colesville Towers. That's what we're talking about, right? That's where this house is, like right as you're coming into downtown, basically.
If you're coming
from the Beltway.
If you're coming from the Beltway, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it abuts.
Just past the old library.
But this is on the other side of the street. This is
on the other side of the street.
The house that abuts the large apartment.
Yeah, I know which one you're talking about. Yeah, I mean, it's a good site for missing middle. If we pass my ZTA, it'd be right square in the middle. You could do whatever by right there, but it would have to be a form based. It would have to be form based on it. So I think the floating zone. I just want to make sure I understand that would give it the ability. How would that work with planning? How do you approach that if someone said, "Hey, I want to build, a quadruplex here"? Can they do that under that proposal?
So what they would probably get, the recommendation is to give them a CRN floating zone, and CR zones tend to have the most flexibility in unit type. So you could get whatever unit type would fit on the property given your lot size and the specifications of the zone, the density. So if it was a certain FAR, they could probably achieve, again, if they wanted R20, they were looking at most they could achieve is 3 units.
3 units.
Triplex.
And this, would this be equivalent or no? It would be that you would be.
We could pick a density that would make that equivalent, that they could achieve a triplex or a quadplex on this property.
Well, I'd like to suggest that if possible. I think this would be a good location for it.
Right. So I'd work with planning staff to find out what the right densities for that would be.
If my colleagues agree.
I have no objection. I think, the odds that you could afford to go through a process like a floating zone application, in order to create a 3 unit, I'm just not super confident that that's economical. But I don't think that I don't really object to it. I just, it seems a little anomalous to me. I mean, it could easily be done in a way that is quite fine. I'm skeptical that a floating zone is going to work if you can't assemble multiple properties. I mean, that was the difference with Forest Glen, is we thought there could be multiple property owners that would combine. So I think it's unlikely that this works, and I worry a little bit that we're creating confusion. But I'm willing to, sort of support the idea.
And the property owner is the one so they requested R20, which would allow them just to do what they needed to do without having to work. So, but your point was, they hadn't talked to neighbors and think, what was that? Was
exactly. Exactly. There's been no process really to support that, Gwen.
Yes, and really and truly, R20 is not the correct zone if they're looking to do some sort of small multifamily development. That is not, our R20 was intended for a very different kind of development than, one triplex or quadruplex on a property like this, the CRN rec zone. And I think, again, doing a floating zone, we support council staff's recommendation, both in terms of the zone and in terms of the process.
Okay.
Okay. Any objection? All right. Sounds good.
Okay. So we're going to move into now the plan-wide housing recommendation follow-up. You had requested in the review of the housing recommendations, the plan-wide housing recommendation is a recommendation to preserve existing market rate affordable housing where possible, striving for no net loss of affordable housing. And the committee then asked during that review of that recommendation, how did the plan intend, what is the mechanism by which the plan intends to do this? How else does this fit in with the recommendations in the plan, the zoning recommendations? And planning staff have come back with an analysis of this, basically The relevant ones are 5 garden apartments in the plan area. I'm sorry, the circle attachment numbers are incorrect. They're on pages 48 through 59 of a PDF of the staff report. A little confusion there, getting it posted. And if you'd like, they already have permission to share their screens. I don't know if they want to go through that evaluation with you, or you've had time to read it and you just want to go through the packet, given we are supposed to end at 4:25 today.
Okay, I'm prepared to use the packet, but how quickly, if you want to share screens, how long do you think that would take here?
There's 12 slides, so we might be running right against our time. I can certainly give like a high level.
Yeah, can you give us a high level? Thank you, Lisa. Sure.
So what is attached in the packet is kind of a summary of our approach to the gardens that's outlined currently in the plan, where we preserve the existing market rate affordable housing through retention of existing zones. And then we talk about precedents that have been achieved in other plans, mostly the Forest Glen Montgomery Hills plan and the Veers Mill Corridor Master Plan. I think the most apt comparison here is the Forest Glen Montgomery Hills plan, where we had 2 aging garden multifamily structures, the Fields of Silver Spring and the Belvedere Apartments. For the Fields of Silver Spring, it was an existing affordable housing property. It had LIHTC units that would expire during the plan. With the recognition of that and its aging status, the plan recommended to reconfirm the existing R10 zone, but there was a recommendation to support a future application for a CRT floating zone, which is roughly equal a CRT 2.0. The affordable housing threshold there was 15% MPDUs and 5% market rate affordable housing units through DHC rental agreements. That zoning yield roughly a little bit more than doubled what they currently had on their property. And then the Belvedere Apartments was rezoned from an R10 to a CRT 2.0 with 15% MPDUs, and that the committee really emphasized the importance of family size units. So a minimum of 25% of the units should be 2-bedroom units. And that roughly tripled the amount, the rezoning roughly tripled the amount of units that would be allowed. I think when we talk about precedents, the big thing is the Veers Mill plan. The first one was Rock Creek Woods, where we worked with a willing property owner who really mentioned that it's an aging multifamily structure with a lot of infrastructure and utilities issues that were really expensive, and it was a really constrained site. So that property was rezoned from R20 to CRT 1.25, roughly around doubled the existing to what would be allowed under the new zoning, with 15% MPDUs and 5% market rate affordable housing, and a minimum of 20% of the units should be 2 bedrooms and 5% should be 3 bedrooms. And there would be priority for residents to return to those units in the event of redevelopment. But I think the project that we all think of is really Alpine View. But I think Alpine View is a really unique case in that it's a 30-acre site, which is huge, and it allows redevelopment to be phased over 4 different redevelopment phases. But that property was rezoned from R30 to a CRT 1.25 with 15% MPDUs and 20% market rate affordable housing through GHC rental agreements, and 20% of 2-bedroom units and 5% 3-bedroom units. So that, I think, kind of sets up the 4 precedents that we have to talk about. And then in the packet, we kind of walk through the 5 garden apartments that are on the table because Falklands is in the master plan for historic preservation, and the North Parcel has a plan for redevelopment, and Montgomery Arms is also listed in the master plan for historic preservation. So Blair Park, I think, is the outlier. It's owned by MHP, and it is being recommended to be rezoned through the Silver Spring plan to allow flexibility for future affordable housing development. Roughly, the new zoning would double the amount of existing dwelling units on the property. And then the 4 properties, the 4 left, Blair Park Gardens, Eastern Avenue, Rock Creek Springs, and Spring Gardens are the 4 that we have left that I think are really on the table. And I won't walk through each of the properties, but in the packet, you'll see that we have the number of units, its zoning, what that zoning could yield, the number of family size units, 2-bedroom rents and what that effective AMI would be. I think it's important to note that these are all small garden apartments for the most part, and that the affordability of those units is much deeper than what we allowed by an MPDU. So that they're usually at 40 to 50% of AMI, which is about $60,000 for a family of 3. So that's an important context to be set. And then finally, we lay out 3 options.
Wait, Lisa, can you say that again? You're saying that, what was the point you were making there about the deeper affordability level? That
Sure. So the 2-bedroom rents for the 4 garden apartments, they're around 50% AMI. So they're much deeper today.
Currently, that's an important point.
I think
the market rate affordable is about 50% AMI for family 4.
So let me back up. So when we talk about existing market rate affordable housing that's affordable to a household earning around 80% AMI. These are much deeper than that. Now, I think the important thing to remember is that even though they are affordable to households earning around 50 to 60% AMI, there's no market protection for these units, which I think is, an important part of this conversation and what we'll discuss, but it is much deeper.
Yeah. First of all, I mean, I don't want to take too much time with an academic point, but it's worth noting that market rate housing is 50% AMI in downtown Silver Spring. That's because it was built a long time ago.
Right. And these are very old. These are built in the 30s and the 40s. So it's not, it's not 60s or 70s. Right. These are almost approaching 100 years old, some of them.
And I often feel like if we want to have that same opportunity in the future, we have to build housing today to have that 50% AMI housing, 50 years from now, 100 years from now. Like, that's really, really important. And that's a big problem for us. We often stop new housing out of concern about the affordability of new housing, not recognizing that over time housing becomes more affordable. Okay, so back to your point.
I think the only thing that we have left is, our analysis, we kind of outlined 3 approaches. The first is we retain the existing R10 zoning as currently proposed, but I think we have evolved and we're moving towards, we would support adding language to support a future local map amendment, as was done in the Forest Glen plan, for a CRT floating zone as long as affordability or no net loss conditions are met. We think this is a really good idea because at the time of application, we could evaluate a lot of things that we can't really evaluate without a willing property owner, and all of the property owners we approached didn't really seem to have an appetite to engage with us. And so we could evaluate things like historic value, the development context, the site's constraints, like for Rock Creek Woods at the time of application. But we also know that adds time, process, money to the equation. So there's also option 3, which we could rezone these properties for an additional density with increased unit yields roughly 3 times either the units or the FAR as Ms. Dunn outlined in her packet.
And I think that the point that Lisa is making here that I would like to really emphasize is if you simply rezone a property, you have really no control over the number of affordable units you get. They could come in and do 15% MPDUs and be done with it because that is what the law requires. If you do what we're suggesting as the sort of middle ground approach and say these properties could be appropriate for a floating zone, you can put as a criteria for that as long as they are providing a really significant affordable housing option. Just giving the zoning gives you no leverage to get the affordable housing. Having it be something that requires this local map amendment gives you some leverage to get the kinds of public benefits that you want.
Right. So, Pam, where are these 3 options presented? I'm scrolling through.
Okay, so the options are at the end of the packet that was provided by the planning staff, which is at the very last page of the packet in general. But I just want to make a point that what first, well, I had a different point, but I think it's past the conversation now. But the other thing is, so this recommendation for striving for no net loss, that is a master plan recommendation. So whether that master plan recommendation is applied to an application for a floating zone or is applied to an application for option method development, that is how it's going to come through. Okay, so you can put in a plan that these properties must strive for no net loss of affordable units. And then that master plan recommendation, the conformance with that will come through on an application for a floating zone, but it will also come through on an application for subdivision and an application for site plan. So while I understand there is a sense that a floating zone provides more regulation to it, it is basically going to be looking at the exact same recommendation. Now, in the case of the floating zone, the council gets to approve that ultimate rezoning. And so the council gets to weigh in on whether the applicant has fulfilled enough of that obligation through this master plan recommendation to strive for no net loss. In the case of an optional method development, the planning board gets to say whether that applicant is in compliance with the master plan in striving for no net loss, right? And what you get in one case is you get less process and time, right? We're talking affordable housing projects that we hope give us a lot of affordable housing. So we regularly ask our planning board to make sure that our optional method development projects meet the master plan. That's what this is going to do. In the case of a floating zone, it will be asking whether the planning board agrees with that through a recommendation, whether the hearing examiner agrees with that through a recommendation, and then the council gets to make the decision. But this is all still based on one master plan recommendation, regardless of the process that you choose.
Okay, I've got Will and Andrew.
Appreciate the conversation, Ms. Wright. Just on that point, you said something that is very compelling to me, and I think these are a special category, right? This type of preservation where you have this deeply affordability, albeit old, right? But we want to make sure that we, want part of the preservation strategy is make sure that we don't lose these types of affordability. And you said someone could come in with 15% and be done. That seems to be a little inconsistent with what Ms. Dunn just said. So I want to understand the nuance here. And I have another point, but just on that point in particular.
Yes, I mean, I think what Ms. Dunn said is theoretically true, but the reality of the development review process is that you can have people who are submitting a development application provide very creative arguments about how they are striving for no net loss.
Which is the language we include.
Correct. Yeah. But striving does not mean accomplishing.
Absolutely. Okay.
And so I really believe that we have much stronger ability to negotiate, and we have more leverage to actually achieve no net loss through the local map amendment process.
I appreciate that. Thank you. Yeah, I think, for that reason, and I think we should do the local map amendment process. I think it's also important, an added feature that the council gets a look here, just to concur. I know it adds some time, but again, I think, part of our preservation, production, and protection in the case of renters and others, and the 3 Ps we've talked about, and how do we get to our affordable housing strategy? Got to do all of those things. And I think these types of units in particular deserve the extra scrutiny because of who they're currently serving. So I would be very comfortable with that. And I hope we can, I hope I can win one today, but I think that that makes sense in this context, particularly. Yeah. Thank you.
Andrew.
Yeah, I'm a little torn here. On the one hand, I am sympathetic to the point of view. This is different than what we dealt with, previously. And we were talking about with Alpine View and the other properties, we had property owners that were coming forward and wanting to move forward with these efforts. And here it seems like there aren't willing or interested property owners, at least at this time. And that is different than that. In that respect, I think that is a much better process. I think council staff is absolutely right. And it has yielded and will yield, I think, in that plan. We've already started to see some positives coming out of that plan with respect to no net loss in affordable housing. And I think we all should be very proud of the collaborative efforts that have taken place to yield those results. The floating zone, I'm a little concerned. I understand the idea that there's additional scrutiny and there's additional leverage, but that means more lawyers. That means more process. That means more hearings. That means more money. And that means less affordability. I mean, just that's the way that it works. The money has to go somewhere. And ultimately, the economics of this play a role. And so I am torn. If the goal here is to make it easier to build affordable housing, we are choosing the process that makes it longer and makes it more expensive to build affordable housing in this case. And so I see both arguments here. The challenge that I have too is I'm just curious if the floating zone is the appropriate vehicle here to address this issue that council staff has raised, which I think is a really important point. Is there a reason why planning didn't put that forward originally? I mean, if that's the best path, then why isn't that in the plan?
Sure. So I think when we were developing the plan, we did talk about putting a floating zone, but ultimately we decided to retain the existing zone just because there was no appetite for the property owners that we had talked to. The ones that we did talk to didn't seem to have a real interest in redevelopment in the near or the short term or the midterm. I think certainly for future plans, we can, if this is how the community wants to look at these types of garden style apartments, we'll certainly evaluate it more carefully and probably will recommend that in future plans. But again,
I would just note, we knew that they could apply for a floating zone even without the master plan recommendation. I mean, that is what happened if you're familiar with the MHP project in Forest Glen, which happened before the actual master plan. They applied for a floating zone to rezone garden apartments to allow for redevelopment as a mixed income MHP project. And that got approved, and the project is approved, and it's underway, and, all is good. So I think what we're saying is that the language in the plan strengthens the potential for someone to apply for a floating zone. And again, on the other side of it, you really have to take into account that if you simply give away the zoning, you lose control as to whether it will end up being affordable housing. It could very well not end up being affordable housing.
It also could very well never be redeveloped. Somebody could buy it, could reinvest in it, and charge much, much higher rent. So, I mean, I think the hypotheticals here, they go both ways. And I'll be honest, I don't want to overdo it here either, because even if we were to approve a floating zone, I see that as a mediocre at best outcome, to be honest, like at best mediocre. Because the best case scenario here is that we have willing property owners, we work together, we get outcomes that deepen affordability, that preserve levels of affordability for a diversity of residents and of families, and we move forward with it. But it is in a way that is additive. This is we're putting in language, and we're kind of giving ourselves credit for doing something without making it any easier to build affordable housing, without really putting ourselves in a position. I mean, if what you're saying is true, that the reason why you didn't put in a floating zone is that you didn't think that there was interest in doing it, well, it doesn't really make for a particularly compelling case for us to do it here. I'm not necessarily opposed to it, but It sounds like this is something that you considered and you abandoned because there was a lack of interest and it didn't seem like it was going to yield the benefits that you suggested. And so, I mentioned earlier, striving does not mean accomplishing. I think that's relevant to this conversation. We're talking about this as we're going to strive to incentivize these sites to redevelop in a way that deepens and protects affordability. But it doesn't seem clear based on anything that we've heard here that that's likely to happen. And, I have some real concerns about that. So I don't want to make this out to be like we've done something significant here by doing a floating zone. If that's ultimately where we end up, I'm not necessarily opposed to it. But that is not in any way creating a higher likelihood of getting more affordable housing out of this plan once we approve it, any more so than the conversations that you all had during the significant work that you all did in your outreach and your efforts, through the development of the plan. So I just wanted to say that.
Yeah, I want to have a slightly different take on it. We in planning and zoning cannot promise or create a definite outcome on anything. What we can do is we can set out the significant public interest goals that the government has for individual sites, and we can provide incentives so that we say, if you meet this public interest goal, whatever it may be, whether it be biotech or affordable housing or retail or whatever the public interest goal is, if you do this, we will provide you with additional density, which is what is our sort of
but with respect, isn't that what council staff is recommending? I mean, exactly what you just said.
Well, no, council staff is essentially
that's
saying,
what council staff is recommending, right?
Well, they're sort of saying give the density and hope through language in the master plan that we will be able to negotiate for no net loss of housing. And what we're saying is don't give the density until we actually know that we're going to be getting no net loss of housing. It's a question of how we can.
Ms. Dunn, respond to that, and then I'll yield back to.
Can I ask everyone to please address, is it possible? These are small sites. I mean, other than a nonprofit developer, the idea of no net loss of affordable, in other words, replacing existing 50% AMI, that's 50% because it's old. There's no new costs associated with it. New construction, 50% AMI, that's really tough. I think we want new development here when this building runs out, or else it will just upgrade within the existing structure and the affordability will go away anyway.
Right. And I'll answer as quickly as I can because I know we're under the time constraint here. But what I would say is that requiring no net loss could be a hurdle that none of these properties might meet. Now, one of them might, two of them might, but none of them might. If that's the requirement and the requirement for rezoning, I think that both Councilmember Friedson and Chair Reamer are right that you may get zero redevelopment in the sense of they can go in and scrap the insides of the buildings, take care of all the infrastructure needs that are literally going to probably fall apart with probably 20 years. These are buildings that are already approaching 100 years old. And if they don't create new units, they don't go through subdivision. They don't have to provide any MPDUs. They just have to recreate the units and get the rents they can get for them, which will have to recoup their costs for redoing the units, and we'll get zero affordability. So the trade-off is you get either zero affordability because they won't redevelop, or you give them enough to incentivize redevelopment, which we've learned in other cases can be up to 3 times their current density. A 3 FAR doesn't seem crazy in any of these locations. And then the reality is, how do you get what you want when they get the 3 FAR? And I guess I'm of the camp that believes that our master plan recommendations do mean something, and that the board can evaluate when these come in, whether they're striving for no net loss is appropriate or not. They can, when we listened to the owners of Rock Creek Woods during the Mears Mill plan, we were sympathetic as a council and a committee and a staff to understand that they had property constraints. So we put on them a 5% rent regulated requirement that was different from Alpine View. They had a different setting. Okay, this was, yes, done during the master plan, and so that's in the master plan. But again, master plan language could say to strive for no net loss and have hopefully an evaluation done as applicants come in. Yes, you could do it under rezoning as well. It'll still be based on the same master plan language.
Okay, I think I'm more comfortable with the encouraging an application through a floating zone, striving for no net loss, but not a strict requirement, enabling the board to negotiate and get the best deal that they think they can get. I think that that's the best we can ask for. So we want to set a significant zoning envelope so that it is financially worth it to go through the process. And we want to empower the board to negotiate. But I don't know how we just rezone and say no net loss. We can't do that.
Chair, right? The board won't be necessarily negotiating this no net loss. It will come all the way to the council for the rezoning.
Because it's a floating zone? Mm-hmm. It doesn't go to the board?
We'll go for a recommendation to the board, but they don't make the decision. It will go to the hearing examiner. They won't make a decision either.
So if we rezone it and say strive for no net loss, then that puts it at the board and not the council?
No. Oh, so if you zone it, then it goes to the board, right? If you zone it to, say, a 3 FAR with a master plan recommendation of striving for no net loss, then it will go to the board.
Casey.
If I could just suggest, there are cases where we have provided some color commentary in the text of master plans to the effect that a project should be approvable at the mapped FAR and height only if certain other conditions are met, or at least strongly suggesting that they should be met. In Long Branch, for example, I believe we did, and I'm not holding up this as a model because I think actually, to be honest, the council kind of overdid it on trying to push the affordability component. But in principle, you can say that this is approvable at this height and FAR to the extent necessary to accommodate an additional level of affordability. You could say in an effort to strive for, or at least maximize the amount of affordable units, that the project should be approvable at the upper limit of the mapped zoning. But if it does not provide an extraordinary or above normal degree of affordable units, that perhaps the board might exercise its discretion not to approve that. I just want to clarify also the reason, legally speaking, it's not that the board doesn't negotiate hard or the planning staff doesn't negotiate hard and the council hearing examiner does. I think Councilmember Friedson makes some really good points about adding costs and uncertainty to the process. That's true. The benefit, as Gwen said, of taking it to the council is because zoning is a legislative act, the council has more power to be subjective, honestly, legally speaking. The board is rules-based. It's acting as a regulator trying to apply in an objective way whatever it is that we think the plan and the zoning code say. If it goes to the council, it is a legislative act to rezone the property. And as a result, and maybe one of the lawyers who's going to contradict me, but I believe this is true in practice as well as legally, the council just inherently has more discretion and wiggle room. And I think that's what Gwen means when she says the council has more leverage in order to try to insist on some higher degree of affordability. But I think that we have precedents in other master plans for language that gives it another push without taking it to the hearing examiner. Rosemary Hills is another example. Blittonsville plan where we had some of those properties where you said, well, this should be approvable if, you should be able to redevelop one part of the property if the other property is preserved. You can you can incorporate different conditions.
And
So I'd suggest we could take this offline and maybe come up with maybe work on some language.
I need to add in, because again, I appreciate all the conversations, but most of the folks involved have not been in the down and dirty negotiations with developers. And the reality of that property in Littonsville is we put in very specific language about how it could redevelop. And I will tell you that the owner came in a year and a half ago and said, let us just scrape the whole site clean and build new housing with 15% affordable. And that was exactly the opposite of what the master plan had said to do. Well, so we said as staff, no, that's not what the master plan said. You can't do that. And it did not result in them doing what the master plan suggested. So I just would say, if I had to go back and do Littonsville again, I honestly would not have rezoned that property. I would have said, require them to come in for a local map amendment, because then we can actually negotiate for what we want. Yeah. It ended up being essentially just, we're going to stay status quo because we want to scrape the site.
Well, I hate to contradict my own planning director, but honestly, these rezoning applications are a nightmare, and I would not put anybody through it. So yeah, I hear what Gwen's saying is right. They will try to push and they'll try to run us over. And you have to rely on Gwen and her team to say no before it even gets to the board. On the other hand, taking it to the hearing examiner, Councilmember Friedson is correct. That is a process.
Well, it depends. I mean, MHP is happy to do it. You know, they did it in Wheaton. It depends. Will?
Thank you. My goodness. You made my first point when, like, we have so little leverage. You're the one that actually is doing this, and you've done it the longest. And I just can't understand why we won't listen to you about what you're saying. This is what actually happens. And if we want to get this, and especially in this case, where you have existing deeply affordable housing, and yes, it could be scrapped tomorrow. And, if they want to spend all that money to gut them out, and maybe that happens, but we don't, what we try to do is incentivize the best we can with the levers we have. I just think this is a case where we absolutely have to take maximum leverage here. And you're telling us that, and we're just, and I just really believe that that's what we should do, and very strongly. Halpine View, I still wake up at night on Halpine View. That was our first master plan, and I know it's turned out, it's not horrible. I think we could have gotten more, right? But that was a fair discussion, and there's a lot more housing involved and a lot more room to work with, and you had folks that were willing to work. I think in this case, we definitely have to use the maximum leverage we have, and it's the council's role, to Casey's point, to say, is this good enough in this case? And I think we should maintain that right, particularly with this type of deeply affordable housing. And it's not an all or nothing. They could always go in and scrap things, but how do we incentivize? The one question I had was, what other incentives are there? Because we've done a lot of things, right? Impact fee, I think a lot of times we forget there's been a lot of steps taken to reduce the process and to reduce the cost of development. One of the things I'd like to see, we don't do it in this context, is an overlay of all those incentives so that we can actually understand, because I get so frustrated with hearing, well, it's going to cost too much and we can't do it. But we've layered on like 6 things that reduce the cost or the process, and we don't keep that in context, because every time we default to the same argument, it's going to take too long and cost too much. So I strongly believe that in this case, we should add this little additional piece of leverage to make sure that we try to ensure affordability.
Okay. I'm inclined to agree with floating zone, but again, I think we can't say it has to be no net loss. I don't think that's realistic on each of these properties. If properties were to combine, I think maybe you could do that, but I think we would want to say, significant affordability. We want to have some way of making clear what our expectation is. And at this, but
how would that functionally work? So if you said from like just to ask your question, if you say, okay, yes, floating zone, and it comes, how do they know what to go for? How would that work?
Master plan recommendation, same as the others. There are findings that have to be made by the decision maker. So
wait, sorry. So Pam had provided a lot of detailed information about specific affordability, 5%, 10% more. I don't think we can go that far, because that was laying out a formula to achieve a specific outcome. I think Will is asking, how do you set the expectation accurately? And I don't have the language right now handy, but I think the point is it should be strong. And I think to me, this isn't really about cost, it's about risk, and it's like a developer starting something, not knowing what the preferred outcome is. And so we should provide some guidance there. And I don't have that language off the top of my head. Let's hear what Andrew, if we could, I'd like to hear what Andrew has to say, and then we can.
Yeah, it sounds like you guys are in agreement with the floating zone. I don't agree. I agree with council staff. Just to be very clear with that, I think that we should rezone and we should include strong master plan language as part of the process. And I will just respectfully say that if master plan language doesn't mean anything, I have no idea why the heck we've been spending so much time working on this plan. It does, frankly, undermine the process that the council does weigh in. It weighs in pretty strongly with a legal document. It's called the master plan. And that's our job. That's what we do. That's what we're here to do. That's what we've been spending dozens and dozens and dozens of hours doing. And so I can't allow myself to believe that master plan language is completely useless and completely meaningless. And if I do, then I'm not sure why I work so hard with so many of you on refining the details of these plans and making sure that we get them right. So I'm going to vote against the floating zone. Applicants could do the floating zone. This feels like a virtue signal to me, to be perfectly honest with you. The applicants could do it anyway, whether we put it in the master plan or not. I think we accomplish very little here, if anything. I think if our goal here is to actually accomplish what we aspire to do in the plan itself, then we actually have to do some things that move us in that direction. So I appreciate the recommendation by council staff. I would support it, and I don't support the floating zone.
All right. Well, first of all, I'm not convinced that the master plan language about our broad goal for no net loss of affordable housing would put any requirement on a specific property to exceed the MPD requirement. I just don't think it would. So I don't share the view that that would apply. Secondly, I was concerned that where this conversation was heading previously was towards an historic designation over this district. That was my first concern. I wanted to make sure that was not where the county would head. And we haven't discussed that, but I inferred that was the reason why this property was not recommended for rezoning, which I think would have been not a good idea. And I would like to open the door for redevelopment there, given that no property owner has expressed any interest, within the 20 to 25 year timeline of this plan. It doesn't seem likely that much is likely to happen regardless. I've been on the council for 12 years. Turns out that's a pretty long time. So I think a floating zone, opening the door to a significant increase of density while expressing we want for that an increase of affordability. If a property owner is actually interested, which at the present time, none of them are, as far as we know. I think that door is quite open. And if we can get some good language about what we're looking for on affordability, I think actually to me, it seems quite reasonable.
Yeah. And the process would be the process that Ms. Wright, described, but just with the language on getting you want to get the language on affordability.
I need some language. I don't have language for my colleagues today, so why don't we postpone? There's nothing to vote on because we don't have the language. It's sort of conceptual here. I think we need some language for you to consider.
To that end on language, could I just suggest again, and we'll work with council staff on this, something that says strive for no net loss. However, at a minimum, do it at least what we're requiring on publicly owned properties of 30%.
Well, that is no net loss, isn't it? I mean,
well, not exactly. It wouldn't be exactly no net loss.
I'm just not sure that's realistic.
Affordability in each of these sites.
Private property developing without a tax break.
The reality, most of these would develop, I'm guessing, if we're going to do a significantly affordable project on any of these, it will be by a private nonprofit group. It will use low-income housing tax credits. It will use all the tools in the book.
Well, and that is certainly a scenario for all of these, which would be a good scenario. A nonprofit acquires them and then redevelops them, and it goes to the county council for approval, and a nonprofit would have a pretty high degree of confidence of approval at the county council. And I generally like that a lot.
But I think I was reacting to the idea that people were saying just strive for no net loss may not be specific enough. I think that's what you were saying, Chair Reamer. And I was saying if you wanted to be a little more specific, you could say it should be.
Well, I was almost saying that strive for no net loss is too specific, because no net loss, according to Pam's number crunching, no net loss put the affordability somewhere around 30% of the units. And I'm skeptical that any private property owner on such a small site could do that. I just don't think that's possible unless you combine sites. A nonprofit certainly could, but I don't know that a private property owner could do that. So, I would tend to say strive for no net loss is better, but if there's something better than that, I'd like to find out.
Yeah, and I'd like, since you and I are kind of working on this, I mean, we can take it offline. I just think we've got to get a little less squishy than, I'd like to have something that has some sort of meaning, so maybe let's take it offline. But I think I agree with you that a nonprofit would be the ideal outcome for these places, so.
Andrew.
Yeah, I'm happy for you guys to come up with language, since I'm out in support of floating zone. It doesn't matter what the language is. I just don't think it's the right approach. So I respect the disagreement here, but you two can work on that. Just as a practical standpoint, if this is our last meeting and everything else is coming back to full council, is the idea that there's going to be a 2-to-1 note in the full council packet, and then there'll be language that you two can then agree on once this actually comes up before council, which probably won't be for at least a couple of weeks. I mean, I just want to understand what the process is going to be. I understand that I'm in the minority here, and that's okay.
I think so.
Sounds right. Welcome to the club. Welcome to the club.
Yeah, no, it's all right. In solidarity to you, my friend, I just wanted to get a taste of being on the other side of a 2-to-1 vote. So we're mostly unanimous on most of our decisions, but a little bit of healthy disagreement is okay too. So I appreciate it. Just wanted to clarify the process.
Great.
All right. I guess we got to wrap up here. Okay. We've not finished everything. Pam, how much did we not get through in Lavu?
So the next two things were both under implementation. I think the only two bigger topics were about public benefits and some of the language for partnerships. So that'll be included in the council packet when council gets to implementation, probably the council's last work session.
All right. Well, I would like to discuss whether we can just tack it on to another upcoming Fed meeting here. You're shaking your head, Pam.
Well, we don't have another scheduled Fed meeting for the Silver Spring plan. Since we already have the packet written, if there's this committee can find time, we can find time on the schedule. And you want to
let's try to find some time on the schedule. I would rather. Yeah, I would rather we present the council with a recommendation. So let's see if we can find some time. I don't think it's a lot, right? It's probably an hour or less.
Yeah, less.
Definitely less, yeah.
Definitely less. So I think
Probably do it in half hour.
so maybe, okay, so maybe we can find time for a virtual, but let's say it's virtual so we can really be.
Challenge accepted with this committee.
All right. All right. All right. So we're going to find another half an hour so we can send the council a final recommendation. Okay. Thank you.
Sounds good. Thank you, everybody.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
When those conditions change, this station is updated with up-to-date transportation information to